Welcome to Inside the Program, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'm Joe Cook. We got Justin Wells. Eric Naline's on vacation, but we're going to be bringing the exact same high-value info that you come to expect on Inside the Program. So make sure you stick around. We're talking Arch Manning and other quarterbacks doing some great things in 7-on-7 work before spring break. Some promise being shown by true freshman wide receivers. Alex January and Justice Terry creating a lot of excitement, and also promise with the young running backs as well. So make sure that you do like this video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, head to InsideTexas.com. You can sign up for just $1. You're going to want to stick around with recruiting updates, inside team info, and inside team info like we're about to go over, Justin. The team, like UT students, they're about to go on spring break. And while we know that a lot of guys may be sticking around in Austin for some casual throwing sessions and stuff like that, no more days of the South Padre or the Gulf Shores or the Panama City Beach. Guys are sticking around, but before they got to that point, did a lot of off-season work in 7-on-7. Arch Manning, we got to talk about the Texas starting quarterback, and he made a throw apparently the other day that had everybody stopping and looking and saying, wow, okay, the hype is real with this guy.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think the hype has been real within the team. They've seen this guy doing some – this isn't the first time he's done this. They've seen this over the last couple of years. They're just getting it now more in bunches because this is kind of who Manning is. He is a very special talent. And what's funny about this is that it's known it's his team. It's not like he had to stand up and go, okay, guys, I'm the starting quarterback now. I'm the leader. He didn't do anything like that. He just showed up early. He did what he usually does, and everyone is following suit. And so Arch is being Arch, and you love to hear that because, hey, they lost a lot of receivers in the last 2 years. Tons of kids have been headed to the NFL. They're having to replace a lot of guys. And so you want to see that timing. You want to see them getting in sync, especially with a lot of these freshman receivers that are getting a lot of reps that we're going to talk about later. But Arch Manning is status quo right now. Like we try to minimize the hype, but man, when we hear what we hear from the people we truly trust, it's hard to contain ourselves. Look, you know who else looked really good? Trey Owens. Trey Owens missed like one ball yesterday during his 7-on-7 segment. Like, he has been incredible. He's done really well. Heard some really good things about KJ Lacey. Apparently, KJ showed up knowing the playbook. He came in prepared, kind of like Trey, kind of like Arch did. And so KJ's not just wanting to be the reserve guy. He's there to battle for a backup spot, potentially. He's battling with Trey Owens, and that's going to be a fun thing to watch over the spring. So it's just fun. It's fun to hear that these quarterbacks are doing really well, especially because the receiver room is so young, so inexperienced. You got one guy that's actually working with the team right now that has a catch in a college football game. And so the fact that they're connecting and they're in sync this early, that's a great sign.
Yeah, always good to see this good stuff, not just from the top of the quarterback room, but that info about Trey Owens. I think you and Eric wrote not a lot of balls hitting turf, like you said. Got, making mostly completions. KJ Lacey hitting passes to Parker Livingstone kind of shows that there's a lot of reps up for grabs, not just at receiver. But like you said, there's a backup quarterback spot that I'm sure Steve Sarkisian would love to have turn into a battle. But we talk about receiver. And at this point, the guy's returning. Ryan Wingo, we know he's going to be a part of the rotation. And DeAndre Moore, who Steve Sarkisian said is going to be a little bit limited this upcoming spring. That means that freshmen such as Khaleke Lockett, Jamie French, Dalen McCutcheon, those are going to be some of the guys who have opportunities to earn a little bit more playing time. And one of the things that you and Eric wrote was that, you put together an O-line class. You see the left tackle, you see the center, you see et cetera. You see the safety, you see the corner when you're putting together a secondary. And then you can see with this wide receiver group where they are fitting in. And they're also starting to make a good amount of plays as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I think Texas signed the top wide receiver class in 2025. They all saw the writing on the wall. Early playing time. This wasn't something Texas had to necessarily sell. it was going to be obvious, knowing, especially after Matthew Golden's breakout year, him heading to the league, losing those guys to the NFL draft in April. They knew there was going to be some reps available. I don't think they expected these receivers to be this polished this soon. But maybe that should be the standard. Maybe that should be the expectation, because the three guys they brought in, and I want to include Michael Terry as well, because he's doing a little bit of everything, running back, receiver. He's being moved around a lot. But Dalen McCutcheon looks like he's played wide receiver his whole life. Khalil Lockett doesn't have a weakness. Like, he doesn't drop balls. I guess when you have hands the size of Kevin McHale, that's the way that works. And then Jamie French has an explosiveness to him. He's one that's going to have to get a little bit more finely tuned, but there's so much upside there as well. And I don't want to forget a couple of other guys. Like you mentioned earlier, Parker Livingstone. This is a guy Sark has envisioned as an outside receiver since they brought him on campus. Now he's starting to kind of get into that vibe, into that rotation. And if anybody has forgot about Aaron Butler, nobody in Texas has. Nobody in that wide receiver room or that offensive line or that offensive game plan, none of that has forgot about Aaron Butler. He might be the twitchiest, nastiest of that group. That just a flat out ball player who absolutely shredded the secondary and scout team last year. Now he's getting his reps. Hey, this is a good problem to have when you've got Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell and Jordan Whittington and Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond and all these guys playing in the NFL. It shows that you can develop, but it also shows you've got an opportunity to get on the field early. These freshmen, especially Khalil, Dalen, and Jamie, showed up so ready and prepared. It's cool that they're already connecting with these guys, especially the quarterbacks.
Yeah, and one of the really cool things is you can kind of see a lineage, especially at that slot receiver position. Jordan Whittington, DeAndre Moore was in his shadow.
Very similar styles too.
And now with Dalen McCutcheon, he's in DeAndre Moore's shadow all the time, just trying to learn not just about the position, but that spot. And I'm glad you brought up Butler. You may look at some certain offenses and think like, oh, he could be a slot guy, guy you put into short areas and let his quickness work. Well, with Steve Sarkisian, this guy's got not just the quickness, but the long speed to still stick on the outside. And we've seen smaller receivers work on the outside in Steve Sarkisian's offense. Like he can make Ryan Wingo work, but he can also make Xavier Worthy work. And if you got that explosiveness, you don't have to run a 4-2-1, but if you've got that explosiveness, it really helps in what you're able to do. Heck, I mean, you can go back and look at 2021. I know we don't want to that much. Josh Moore, for all his off-field problems, had some on-field athleticism, and that was a guy that Steve Sarkisian parked on the outside in his offense pretty often. So that's maybe an idea to keep in mind when thinking, oh, maybe move Aaron Butler to the slot. Like, no, this is they value athleticism on the outside, and that's a place where you can put it on display. Before we keep on going, got some defensive linemen as well as some running backs to talk about. A word from Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Days like this, the anticipation's half the fun. The call to adventure. Possibilities in every direction.
Look at that.
The stories you'll bring back. Even the true ones. And already, you can't wait until next time. From first catch to biggest catch of the season, this is where it starts. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Have fun out there.
Let's see. It's about to be baseball season, right? So,
buddy, hey, Alexander had his first baseball practice last night. We're sliding into baseball mode.
Well, if you ever anything
he had to go to Academy to get his baseball bag.
I was about to say,
got a pretty good deal on it too.
You can get that. You can get Big League Chew at checkout. You can get Texas Longhorns gear, Astros, Cowboys, Mavs, Rockets, all the different stuff. Get it at your local Academy.
Be careful with the blue raspberry Big League Chew. I'm just going to give you a heads up on that. My family and I, we're big League Chew guys. We go to Academy for that because they have the best stock. But the blue raspberry makes your mouth look a little odd. So just for heads up before you go coach pitch and you got a big old chaw blue raspberry and it looks weird.
Oh, man. I don't know how to transition out of that, so we won't.
There's no way to. There's no way.
Texas has some very promising young defensive tackles. One is a first-year guy. One's a second-year guy. Justice Terry, supposedly, after arriving probably north of 270 from Manchester, Georgia, he's now probably rocking around 6'5", 300. But he's not the only athletic specimen on that defensive line. Justin, Alex January is also someone who has done a fantastic job here in the spring. There's a lot of snaps available with Broughton, Collins, Lole, Norton, all moving on. Other guys leaving via the transfer portal. A lot of opportunities available. And Alex January, even with guys like Hero Canoe, Cole Brevard, Travis Shaw, I'm missing one probably. Even with those guys coming in, Alex January has really solidified himself probably as a starter with the great spring that he's had so far.
I'm going to guess Cole Brevard, but you may have said that one.
I think
you had him. Actually, I think you.
That's all three, but they want four.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right there. Look, the biggest takeaway here from what we've been hearing is Alex January and Justice Terry. And what's funny is these two had very different tracks to Austin. You know, one was a 3-star for the most part, finally got bumped to a 4 later in his career, started on a defensive line as a 15-year-old at Duncanville. Then you had Justice Terry, who's one of the most freakish, imposing players I've ever covered in person, and came with all this 5-star and hoopla. And, I mean, he has lived up to it. Like, you never know until they're on campus, until they're actually going through activities, until there's some competition with some of the older guys. You never know kind of how they're going to respond. January's a guy that got some really good run late in the season. Like, I mean, he played a lot last year, but when he was getting run in the Peach Bowl and in the Cotton Bowl, he was making plays. And that was so huge for what they envisioned to do this year. Justice Terry, my God, just a big, strong, smart, motivated young man. You know, when I went and talked to his coach at Manchester a few months back, you know, he had mentioned that his parents were probably the most influential people because they're both hardworking. They don't say much. There's not a lot of hype there. They don't talk a lot. They just show up and go to work. Justice Terry's done that. He's not showing up as a 5-star. He's showing up as a freshman that's trying to make an impact, and he's doing that already. And so for the defensive line, that's a question we're going to get all spring. We're going to get that a lot of summer, and especially in August. What's the D-line look like? Because that's been the strength, I feel like, for this program essentially for the last 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years longer than that. They've had a pretty sturdy defensive line. You don't want to lose that in your second year in the SEC. That's so important. The fact that Alex January and Justice Terry are creating that impact, they're creating that excitement. That's the best thing we can hear, because we understand, yeah, they brought in a lot of transfers, but Texas is also really good at development. Devondre Sweat developed, Byron Murphy developed, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, all developed. You know who's going to be the next two on that list? Alex January and Justice Terry developed when we're talking about these guys in the NFL draft in a few years.
Yeah, and with January, you know, even last year, you arrive at campus, and we looked at pictures of him.
He was smaller.
Yeah, and he has put on the professional weight, the weight needed to be someone who's not only trusted in spots.
Very young.
Yeah, to be trusted not just in spots like he was at the Cotton Bowl, but to be the 25 to 30 to 35 snap guy. And it's looking like he's on his way to hitting that mark. Last but not least, we got to talk about running backs. There's a new coach with Chad Scott, bringing his experience with Neil Brown. So maybe there'll be some Mountaineer tandem work, but a lot of the excitement around the running back position. You know, obviously you've got CJ Baxter recovering from injury and some progress being made there. Trey Wisner's coming back off his 1,000-yard season. Jaden Blue's on his way to the NFL. But two guys from the same class, one who played and one who did not, are guys who are earning a lot of chatter right now. Let's talk about Christian Clark. You know, he tore his Achilles during preseason camp, I think just a couple of days
after Baxter.
Someone who made a lot of progress and now is, you know, on his way, probably not towards participating with contact, but towards doing things that'll have him ready for a big role come the fall.
Yeah, so CJ Baxter was the one that was coming along a lot sooner. He was, coming off the injury a lot sooner, and he's a guy that I think, again, they're going to hold him back a little bit, probably most of the spring, but he's going to be so ready this summer and in August, and they're going to need him. Christian Clark was one that, an Achilles tear, that is something that's a tough injury for a running back, for anybody, for any athlete, but especially for a guy that has to cut and move for a running back. Christian Clark, we saw some photos a couple weeks ago of him doing some deadlifts, and we're thinking, wow, now this is not what you would think for at this stage, but he's coming along really nice. And it kind of goes to what we had known right before Tashard Choice left for the Detroit Lions. They weren't going for another running back in the portal. They liked the guys they had. They wanted to go to the dance with the one they were bringing. And so essentially Choice was like, hey, I think we're going to be okay. Of course, Chad Scott comes in and he gets a fresh look at the room and what they may want to do. And Christian Clark is ahead of schedule. Jarrett Gibson, what we say, 210, 215 maybe? Looks great. And this is a guy that got some run last year. He's a guy that I think he's a between the tackles type guy that Texas would love for this zone style. And so it's fun. It's good to hear that, they're making their mark, but especially with Christian Clark. And it kind of goes to show why Texas wasn't so adamant about adding another running back. Now, look, Ricky Stewart and James Simon, they're going to get some run. But the main guys are Trey Wisner, CJ Baxter, Jarrett Gibson, and Christian Clark. So you have a foursome there that can be effective next season. We just want to make sure they get to that stage unhindered. We want to make sure they get to that part. And I think that's why they're going to be held out most of spring. I think that's why they're going to be treated delicately. But right now, those guys are getting after it. They're not playing like they're coming off an injury. If anything, they're cutting loose. And the fact that Christian Clark is already making waves, look, we knew how talented he was. He was the guy from Arizona that was kind of like the under the radar type guy, but his tape was phenomenal. Now we sort of see why Tashard Choice was so adamant about not going into the portal for this season. I think he really likes if those two get back, that's 6 guys that you can rely on, and I think that's exactly what the room needed.
Let's talk about Jarrett Gibson. If you go to Inside Texas and if you join, you can sign up for $1. Now it's a great time to join with recruiting, camp, all the different stuff going on. Or not camp, but spring practice. Jarrett Gibson is someone that the coaches are very, very high on. And y'all wrote about how they're after him hard. They're very, working to make sure that he's ready to do a lot of different things in this upcoming season. Obviously, we know that he was, I guess, not limited health-wise, but limited in his role.
He was dinged up a little bit too last year, if you remember.
He was dinged up, going through freshman things, but they didn't really trust him on every down. He had 2 pass blocking opportunities, and one of them was a very bad opportunity. So they knew what they had in him. They knew that they needed to develop him, and they've pushed him to be ready, in case Baxter's not all the way back, in case Wisner takes a step back for some reason, in case Clark's not ready to go. They're putting all their eggs into getting Gibson ready for this upcoming season and to create a pretty quality running back room right behind.
I think Gibson is penciled into this offensive scheme in 2025 and game plan as these other guys. There's a reason we saw him get run in big games last year. Like, they see something special in this kid. Like, the red zone was that was probably the worst thing for the offense this last season, operating in the red zone. You know what fixes that? A CJ Baxter and a Jarrett Gibson, especially a year older Jarrett Gibson. That's a guy that you said they're working on this guy hard. I think even with Wisner, even with Baxter, I think Jarrett's going to have a role. I think you could see a Henry Melton, Cody Robertson type guy that can come in there and on the goal line, when you're first and goal against Ohio State, against a massive defensive line, I'm going to give it to the biggest guy. I'm going to give it to the guy, and I call him True North for a reason, because he's never gone backwards. He doesn't understand South. All he does is go forward. And so I think you're actually going to see more from a bigger role from Gibson this year, even with Baxter, with Clark, and with Wisner coming back.
That will about do it. Justin, thanks for filling in on Inside the Program. We appreciate it. Eric will be back next week, but make sure that you like this video and subscribe to the channel. We'll be bringing it all throughout spring break. And when spring practices roll around, we'll have plenty to talk about with reports and more. Also, head to InsideTexas.com, sign up for just $1. Place to be for football, basketball, baseball, anything Texas Longhorns related. Head to Inside
We
Texas.
got a lot of stuff this weekend, Joe. We got a lot of stuff.
Recruiting never stops, and you and Charlie will be all over it. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Inside the Program, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors.